The cold wind cut across San Jose Hill, stirring up dry leaves and forgotten whispers. At the top, the Winchester Mystery House stood like a monument to extravagance and grief. Each tower, each window that led nowhere, each staircase that disappeared into nothingness, told a story of profound mourning and relentless obsession. Sarah Whitmore, a historian newly arrived in the city, observed the facade with curious and cautious eyes. She wasn't just an architectural researcher. She felt that this place held something more, something that couldn't be explained by bricks and wood alone. There was something in the winding corridors that seemed to breathe, as if the house itself were alive, watching, waiting. Inside, amidst luxury and madness, resided Eleanor Winchester, the last descendant of the Winchester family, whose face bore traces of an old beauty, worn by decades of sorrow. She moved with an almost ritualistic rhythm, measuring her steps, opening doors that led to empty rooms, as if the house itself dictated her routine. Eleanor was not alone. Each room seemed inhabited by memories and echoes of voices that no one else heard. The antagonist in this case was not a person, but the family's own cursed legacy, the combination of wealth, grief, and an obsession that had consumed generations. Sarah sensed, the moment she stepped into the main hall, that the house had its own rules, invisible but rigorously obeyed by Eleanor. Each room held a secret. Each corridor concealed an object, a note, a portrait that seemed to observe and judge. The central conflict was beginning to take shape. Sarah wanted to uncover the truth behind the fame of the Winchester Mystery House, while Eleanor, unconsciously guided by decades of superstition and pain, kept secrets that could destroy or drive any intruder insane. The tension increased with each step the visitor took. Doors that closed on their own, cold chains along the hallway, whispers that seemed to repeat names from the past. As Sarah explored, she noticed strange patterns. Doors leading to walls, staircases with no destination, windows opening onto nothing. Every detail seemed to have a purpose, an enigma waiting to be deciphered. Eleanor wandered through corridors, murmuring inaudible words, as if conversing with invisible presences. Sarah felt that any carelessness could trigger something unexpected. The narrative intensified with small actions, the creaking of the floorboards under footsteps that weren't there. Eleanor's gaze following the visitor even when she couldn't see her. Letters hidden in drawers that told stories of loss, mysterious deaths, and an obsession that spanned generations. The mystery lay not only in the impossible architecture of the house, but in the consequences of human pain and superstition, making each room a piece of the puzzle that Sarah needed to assemble. The macabre atmosphere of the house was palpable, and each moment increased the feeling that something or someone was monitoring every movement. The tension was heightened by unexpected sounds, footsteps in empty corridors, doors closing abruptly, the echo of old voices laughing or crying, depending on the observer's interpretation. The house was not merely a setting, it was a character in itself, with implicit motivations and unseen dangers. As evening fell over San Jose, Sarah realized she could no longer turn back. The Winchester Mystery House was alive in its complexity, and every decision she made could lead her to uncover secrets kept for centuries, or to face consequences no one could have imagined. The Winchester Mystery House wasn't just a labyrinth of corridors and staircases. Each room carried traces of a family history marked by tragedy and wealth. Sarah began to realize that the architectural details weren't mere whims. Doors that led nowhere, staircases interrupted in mid-air, windows that opened onto walls. Everything had a secret logic linked to Eleanor's restless mind. Eleanor Winchester was not merely a lonely woman, she was a reflection of generations, burdened by grief and superstition. Born into a family that prospered in the arms industry, Eleanor lived surrounded by stories of premature deaths, mysterious accidents, and the pressure of keeping the family legacy intact. Each room she built was, for her, a talisman against bad luck, an attempt to escape a fate that seemed inevitable. Sarah began to notice nuances in Eleanor's personality. The matriarch seemed to alternate between moments of absolute lucidity and episodes of intense paranoia. There were gestures that seemed automatic, as if Eleanor were governed by an invisible and almost ritualistic routine. Walking from corridor to corridor, checking locked doors, writing notes that were destroyed before any visit. This behavior revealed itself as an expression of an old trauma, but also as a psychological survival strategy, keeping the house and her own mind in order. The external environment also reflected the internal atmosphere of the house. Gardens that should have been flourishing were somewhat neglected, but with strategically placed paths leading to small fountains or statues designed to confuse visitors or protect them from certain dangers. The city of San Jose, outside, lived its normal daily life, but those who entered the property felt as if they had crossed a temporal and emotional barrier. The world inside the house seemed to follow its own rules, disconnected from external logic. Secondary characters began to appear in the house's memoirs and records. A former gardener, now deceased, whose letters described strange and inexplicable episodes, employees who reported hearing footsteps in empty hallways, suppliers who stopped working with them due to strange coincidences. Sarah read these accounts with fascination and unease, realizing that the history of Winchester House was not limited to Eleanor's obsession. It was a compendium of macabre experiences accumulated over years. The relationships between the characters, living or dead, were beginning to reveal themselves. Sarah felt the weight of the family's past in every detail. Portraits on the walls showed grave faces, yellowed letters told stories of tragic losses, torn notes held clues to events that no one openly discussed. Eleanor, in turn, seemed to react to any presence with extreme caution, as if each visitor represented a threat or an opportunity to reveal secrets that should never be known. The culture and history of the period were also present. The wealth generated by the arms industry allowed for the construction of the house, but also brought guilt, fear, and superstition. The society surrounding the Winchester family observed, but never fully understood. Sarah understood that the narrative of the house could only be told through the layers of pain, madness, and obsession that manifested themselves in both the objects and human behaviors. As she explored, Sarah realized that Winchester House had an effect on everyone who entered. Small changes in behavior, inexplicable feelings of unease or fascination, and the perception that something was watching her all the time. All of this made it clear that the setting was an active character, influencing choices, creating tension, and connecting past, present, and future in a single labyrinthine space. The initial interactions between Sarah and Eleanor also revealed subtle conflicts. Eleanor, suspicious, tested the visitor with doors that led nowhere, corridors that seemed to change when no one was looking. Sarah, on the other hand, tried to understand patterns, searching for logic and clues that could explain both the architecture and Eleanor's behavior. This dynamic generated constant tension, keeping the narrative fast-paced and nuanced, without needing to resort to lengthy explanations or expository dialogue. With this, the world of the Winchester Mystery House ceased to be merely a physical setting. It became a complex web of memories, actions, and human relationships, where each character, even the visitor, was challenged to confront secrets that could alter their perception of reality. Sarah was no longer just observing. She was becoming part of this macabre and fascinating story, prepared to uncover the enigmas the house concealed. With each step through the winding corridors of Winchester House, Sarah felt reality distorting. The creaking of the floorboards didn't match her position, doors closed on their own, and sometimes she seemed to hear murmurs in empty rooms. These weren't just objects. They were signs that the house was reacting to her presence. Eleanor, ever watchful, kept her distance, but her penetrating gaze observed Sarah as if trying to anticipate her movements. The first obstacle arose when Sarah found a room blocked by a staircase that led nowhere. She tried to carefully open the door, but the doorknob seemed alive, turning on its own, refusing to budge. Eleanor emerged from the side corridor with a serious and almost threatening expression. "Some places weren't made to be discovered," she said without moving her lips, only with her eyes. Sarah realized that the tension wasn't just coming from the walls. The matriarch was part of the enigma. While investigating, Sarah began to find objects out of place. Torn letters, strangely positioned furniture, upside-down photographs. Each discovery brought more questions than answers. The conflict intensified as she tried to understand whether the phenomena were the result of paranoia, tradition, or something truly inexplicable. Eleanor, silent and meticulous, seemed to test the visitor's limits, leading her down paths that alternated between apparent safety and psychological danger. Tensions rose when Sarah found what appeared to be an old diary, written by a distant relative of Eleanor's. The pages revealed mysterious deaths and unusual accidents linked to the Winchester family. Each account heightened the feeling that the past was not dead but active, infiltrating the present. Eleanor noticed the discovery and reacted subtly, changing Sarah's path with small gestures, closing doors and indicating routes that deviated from the truth. Suddenly, the conflict took on another dimension. The environment began to defy Sarah's logic. Stairs that once led to bedrooms now ended in walls. Corridors stretched impossibly, and the perception of time seemed altered. She began to doubt her own sanity. Eleanor, perceiving the confusion, remained calm, almost indifferent, as if the visitor were only beginning to enter the web the house was creating. Secondary characters began to interfere indirectly. Former employees, mentioned in accounts of letters and notes, had left enigmatic instructions or cryptic warnings about certain rooms. A missing gardener, whom Sarah discovered through old clippings, had recorded strange events of doors moving on their own and voices in empty hallways. Each clue reinforced that the house was not only physical, but also a psychological labyrinth, with Eleanor as its silent guardian. The conflict also took on an emotional dimension. Sarah needed to balance her curiosity with growing fear. Every step was a risk. The house seemed to react to her intentions, sometimes guiding her, sometimes threatening her. Eleanor, in turn, showed restrained frustration, not out of malice, but out of a need to protect secrets that could shake not only the family history, but also the mental integrity of any intruder. The initial tensions between the protagonists manifested in small actions: doors that slammed shut in front of Sarah, stairs that seemed to tremble beneath her feet, displaced objects that indicated she wasn't alone. Each obstacle revealed more about Eleanor's mind and the labyrinth she had built, while Sarah needed to act with intelligence, courage, and patience to avoid getting lost in the physical and psychological traps of the house. The conflict escalated when Sarah discovered a room filled with photographs of every worker, visitor, and Winchester family member who had passed through the house. Some had mysterious disappearance dates. Others were old portraits with eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. The discovery not only heightened her fear, but brought an implicit responsibility. She was dealing with something bigger than herself, a cycle of obsession that spanned generations. Meanwhile, Eleanor observed without directly interfering, but her silent reactions were enough to keep Sarah constantly on alert. The visitor began to realize that Winchester House was not just a place of study or curiosity. It was a continuous test, where every action had consequences and every decision could change the course of what would be revealed or kept secret. The narrative tension solidified with a series of simultaneous events: footsteps heard where no one was, doors locking themselves, echoes of old voices, objects moving without explanation. Sarah understood that the main conflict was not only to unravel the story of Eleanor or the house, but to survive the very psychological experience that the Winchester Mystery House imposed, while grappling with the limits of her courage, perception, and understanding of reality. As Sarah explored the house more deeply, she realized that the Winchester Mystery House wasn't just the stage for the conflict between her and Eleanor. There were additional layers, smaller stories that intertwined with the main plot. Each room, each winding corridor, brought to light subplots that revealed not only the Winchester family's past, but also the secrets of those who dared to enter that labyrinth of impossible walls. One of the subplots emerged from the old accounts of the servants. Sarah found notes and diaries from gardeners and housekeepers who had spent years trying to keep the house functioning. Some described inexplicable phenomena: doors that disappeared, staircases that changed position, and whispering voices that seemed to be asking for help. These documents not only added layers of mystery, but also provided subtle clues about Eleanor's personality and the secrets she was trying to protect. Another subplot involved Sarah herself. With every step she felt watched, but she also confronted personal fears and obsessions. Winchester House became a psychological mirror, reflecting doubts, anxieties, and life decisions. Her interactions with Eleanor, though silent, provoked questions about courage, intuition, and confidence. Each physical obstacle, doors that wouldn't open, corridors that changed direction, transformed into an emotional and psychological challenge, a mini-journey of overcoming within the larger narrative. The setting of the city of San Jose also began to interact with the secondary plot. Stories from neighbors, rumors about the Winchester family, and accounts of past incidents, disappearances of workers, unexplained accidents, and mysterious visitors created a backdrop that increased the density of the plot. Sarah investigated these parallel elements, collecting clues that could help her understand the labyrinth of the house, but which also confronted her with the complexity of human history and superstition. The tension deepened with the introduction of letters from Eleanor's distant relatives. Some family members questioned the matriarch's actions. Others recounted incidents that Sarah couldn't confirm, but which fueled the atmosphere of mystery. Each letter was a puzzle piece that needed to be fitted together, connecting past lives to present enigmas. The subplots revealed not only the events, but also the ethical and emotional dilemmas that permeated generations of the Winchester family. The house's architectural labyrinth also contributed to the narrative complexity. Some corridors led to secret rooms, revealing collections of objects that told parallel stories. Toys of deceased children, portraits of employees who mysteriously disappeared, diaries with confessions from former residents. Each discovery added tension, showing that Winchester House was not just a building, but a living organism, connected to the traumas and obsessions of Eleanor and all who lived there. Smaller subplots also emerged through indirect interactions. Sarah's presence provoked subtle changes in Eleanor's behavior, who sometimes observed silently, sometimes interrupted the visitor's path with unexpected doors or corridors. Each reaction from the matriarch was another layer of complexity. Sarah needed to interpret signals, read behaviors, and decide which paths to follow without falling into traps, physical or psychological. The pressure of time heightened the tension of the narrative. Sarah realized she couldn't explore the house indefinitely. Every step she took seemed to bring her closer to a revelation or a danger. Corridors that had previously seemed harmless revealed psychological traps, doors leading to seemingly empty rooms, hid notes or objects that provided new clues, and echoes of past events reverberated at the most unexpected moments. The pace of the story accelerated, but each subplot remained connected to the central arc, reinforcing the suspense. Finally, small interactions and seemingly insignificant events began to take on meaning. A fallen painting, a displaced ladder, a broken object. Sarah understood that the Winchester Mystery House did not allow for casualties. Every detail was part of a complex web of actions, consequences, and human relationships, demanding constant attention to decipher the mysteries and survive the experience. The subplots and complexities not only enriched the narrative, but also strengthened the main conflict, unraveling the secrets of the house and understanding Eleanor. Each layer of mystery made the plot more intense and unpredictable, preparing the ground for the next critical point, the turning point where the revelations would definitively change the direction of the story. Sarah walked down the east corridor of Winchester House, old diary in hand, when she noticed something she had never seen before. A half-hidden door behind a heavy tapestry that seemed to pulse, as if breathing. The cold air escaping through its cracks carried a metallic smell, reminiscent of the iron of antiques and old secrets. There was something about that door that couldn't be ignored, and she knew Eleanor would never allow it to be opened. Against her instinct for caution, Sarah pushed the tapestry. The door gave way with a deep creak, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into a dark, damp space. Each step seemed to echo through the house's corridors, alerting Eleanor, who had appeared silently behind her. For the first time, the matriarch's gaze wasn't merely vigilant. There was tension, almost fear. "Some truths shouldn't be discovered," Eleanor said, her voice low and firm, but Sarah perceived a hesitation she had never seen before. In the hidden basement, Sarah found a collection of antique objects, letters, diaries, maps, and photographs that documented dark secrets of the Winchester family. Among them, a sealed envelope with faded red ink stood out. Upon opening it, Sarah discovered detailed accounts of the mysterious deaths of servants and relatives, accompanied by instructions on how the house should be expanded to avoid curses and keep the legacy intact. It was proof that Eleanor not only believed in premonitions and superstitions, but had shaped the entire house around them, transforming grief and fear into living architecture. The shock came next. Some letters revealed that Eleanor had inadvertently caused several tragedies. The constant expansion of the house, the construction of seemingly pointless rooms, and the manipulation of employees and visitors had deadly consequences. Sarah realized that the matriarch, until then seen only as reclusive and obsessive, was also a figure whose actions had real and tragic effects. The narrative tension reached its peak. Winchester House was not just a physical labyrinth, but a catalyst for events that spanned generations. Meanwhile, Eleanor remained silent, but her behavior changed. For the first time, Sarah saw vulnerability. Eleanor indirectly admitted that the house had become a prison, both for herself and for those who entered it. The turning point was complete. The story ceased to be solely about Sarah's investigation and began to question morality, obsession, and the consequences of human beliefs. Tension intensified when the diary revealed the existence of a room no one had ever accessed, a central room hidden in the heart of the house where Eleanor kept a detailed record of every decision that could affect lives. This discovery created a new obstacle. Sarah had to decide whether to proceed, even with Eleanor aware of her actions. Every choice now carried moral weight and real danger, increasing the unpredictability of the narrative. Eleanor, in a moment of rare openness, explained that the house was more than just architecture. It was a manifestation of the fear and grief that gripped the family. Sarah realized that any misstep could trigger consequences that were not only physical, but also psychological and historical. This turning point transformed the story. Winchester House became an active, almost conscious character, while Eleanor ceased to be merely a silent guardian and became a central figure in a revelation that redefined everything Sarah thought she knew. The unexpected event culminated when Sarah found a secret staircase leading to an old, abandoned and dusty playroom. Among the objects was a child's diary containing records of incidents that no one had explained, including mysterious accidents that seemed to align with the construction of new rooms. Sarah realized that the house had fed on grief and superstition, connecting past, present, and future in a disturbing way. The narrative gained additional complexity. It was no longer just about discovering secrets, but about understanding the impact that each human action had caused within that space. Sarah and Eleanor were now linked by a web of events that defied simple explanations, and the tension reached a level where any decision could radically alter the course of history. Upon emerging from the basement, Sarah realized that Winchester House was alive in ways she had never imagined. Every hallway, every door, every shadow seemed to watch her. Eleanor, though still enigmatic, had revealed a fragment of vulnerability and guilt that would change the dynamic between the two. The turning point was complete. The dark past of the Winchester family converged with the visitors present, creating a scenario of mystery and tension that set the stage for the inevitable consequences. After discovering the basement and the letters that revealed the weight of Eleanor's past, Sarah felt the air in Winchester House become denser, almost palpable. Each hallway seemed narrower, as if the house itself reacted to the revelations, monitoring her steps and assessing her intentions. Actions that had previously seemed small now carried greater significance. Touching an object, opening a door, remaining silent, everything could trigger unexpected consequences. Eleanor, in turn, showed a subtle but significant transformation. The shock of the revelations exposed vulnerabilities that no one had seen before. Her rigid and ritualistic posture alternated with moments of hesitation and anxiety, showing that the obsession that had guided her for years had also imprisoned her. She began to realize that Sarah was not just a curious visitor, but a force capable of confronting the secrets that Eleanor had been hiding for decades. This change created a new, tense balance between the two: curiosity versus protection, truth versus secrecy. The first immediate consequence was emotional. Sarah began to feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, not only to unravel the mystery, but to deal with the implications of the discoveries. Each letter, each diary, each object found carried stories of human loss, accidents, and decisions that impacted lives. Winchester House was no longer just a physical labyrinth. It was a stage for ethical and emotional consequences. The visitor had to balance the desire to understand with the need to respect boundaries and cope with the psychological impact of so many revelations. The house's reactions also intensified. Corridors that had previously seemed harmless began to induce confusion. Doors closed abruptly, and small objects fell or moved without apparent explanation. Sarah realized that the consequences were not only human, but environmental. The house reacted to the discoveries, as if testing the determination and courage of anyone who dared to explore it. Each step began to demand more attention and caution. Another direct effect was on the dynamic between Sarah and Eleanor. The silence, previously fraught with suspicion, gave way to tense interactions, where gestures and glances communicated more than words could express. Eleanor, for the first time, began to share information indirectly, revealing fragments of memories and subtle instructions that helped Sarah interpret the enigmas of the house. The relationship evolved from mere surveillance to a kind of silent dialogue, where each reaction from one influenced the behavior of the other. Secondary subplots also gained relevance. Objects and diaries of former employees that Sarah had previously found began to connect with recent events. Accounts of accidents, disappearances, and mysterious incidents now seemed part of a larger pattern, suggesting that Winchester House not only reflected Eleanor's obsession, but also amplified the effects of her decisions on everyone who came into contact with the space. Sarah realized that her investigation was not linear. Each discovery impacted other subplots, making the narrative labyrinth more complex and engaging. The psychological pressure increased as Sarah came to understand the extent of what she had discovered. The turning point not only altered the direction of the story, but redefined the risk and responsibility of each action. She began to act more cautiously, evaluating each corridor and object, weighing whether she should advance or retreat. The narrative tension remained high, but now accompanied by a growing awareness of the ethical and emotional impact of her choices. Meanwhile, Eleanor faced her own consequences. The revelation of the letters and diaries exposed flaws and errors in judgment that she had previously ignored or hidden. The matriarch began to realize that her actions, guided by fear and superstition, had shaped the house in ways that profoundly affected everyone around her. This realization brought moments of introspection, albeit restrained, and paved the way for eventual collaboration with Sarah, transforming the initial tension into a silent alliance based on the need to confront the house's legacy. Finally, Winchester House became an active element in the narrative of consequences. Every corridor, every object, and every space reflected the accumulated impact of past and present decisions. Sarah and Eleanor, now aware of the ramifications of their actions, needed to carefully navigate the labyrinth, reconciling curiosity, fear, guilt, and the need for truth. The narrative gained an emotional and psychological depth that prepared the reader for the next stage, overcoming and growth, where the characters would face new challenges and definitive changes. After the tension caused by the tipping point discoveries and the consequences that followed, Sarah began to realize that her presence in Winchester House was not just an investigation, it was a test of endurance, courage, and perception. Every corridor, every door, and every object made the need for adaptation clear. The house, with all its illogical and labyrinthine architecture, functioned as a catalyst for personal growth, challenging not only the mind, but also the character of anyone who dared to explore it. Sarah had to learn to trust her intuition. Stairs that shifted position, doors that led nowhere, and whispers that seemed to echo from distant walls demanded quick and calculated decisions. Every action had consequences, and she needed to balance curiosity with caution. The challenge at this point was not only physical but also psychological. Sarah learned to remain calm in the face of the unpredictable, to interpret subtle signs from the house, and to confront fears that manifested themselves in almost palpable ways. Eleanor also began to show signs of growth. For the first time, the matriarch let slip vulnerabilities that had been hidden beneath decades of obsession. She began to reflect on the effects of her actions, recognizing that the house, although designed for protection and spiritual security, had also caused suffering to employees, visitors, and even herself. This recognition was not verbalized in lengthy dialogues, but in gestures, open doors to allow passage, silent signs of guidance, subtle changes in routine that showed greater flexibility. The interaction between the two women evolved. Sarah learned to interpret Eleanor's silences and decode her gestures, transforming the initial tension into cooperation. Eleanor, in turn, began to accept that Sarah's visit was not just an intrusion, but an opportunity to confront the house's legacy. Together, they began to face the challenges that the Winchester Mystery House presented to them, finding paths that demanded courage, patience, and emotional intelligence. Sarah's growth also manifested in how she dealt with knowledge of the past. Instead of focusing solely on the secrets and horrors she uncovered, she began to understand the historical and emotional context of the Winchester family. She understood that Eleanor's obsession, though extreme, was a reaction to trauma and loss, shaped by generations of fear and superstition. This insight allowed Sarah to develop empathy, transforming her investigation into a journey of understanding and emotional reconciliation. New challenges arose when Sarah needed to access even more hidden areas of the house, places that demanded not only physical courage, but also interpretation of the architectural and psychological patterns created by Eleanor. Each success along the way solidified her growth, revealing observation, analysis, and problem-solving skills that became essential for surviving and unraveling the mysteries without falling into physical or emotional traps. Meanwhile, Eleanor faced the challenge of confronting her own obsession. Sarah's presence acted as a mirror, reflecting years of isolation, grief, and fear. Eleanor's overcoming this began to manifest in concrete actions, allowing access to certain rooms, indirectly sharing important information, and above all, accepting that the house's legacy didn't need to be controlled by her obsessive surveillance. This growth didn't erase the pain, but it allowed the past and present to coexist in a healthier way. The labyrinthine house, once an enemy and obstacle, became a learning environment. Sarah and Eleanor began to decipher patterns, recognize signs, and anticipate possible changes in the structure, demonstrating evolution in perception, strategy, and collaboration. Each corridor overcome, each door successfully opened, was a reflection of the protagonist's inner growth, showing that facing fears and challenges was directly linked to understanding the story, the house, and themselves. The secondary subplots also gradually resolved themselves. The objects, diaries, and letters that previously created tension now functioned as pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, allowed for a broader understanding of the family's past and the house's function. Sarah realized that every detail, previously chaotic, had meaning within the historical and psychological context of the Winchester mystery house. This understanding brought not only security, but also a sense of control in the face of the macabre labyrinth. By the end of this phase, both Sarah and Eleanor showed visible transformations. Sarah emerged as a more insightful, resilient, and empathetic investigator, while Eleanor moved closer to a quiet acceptance of her past, learning that absolute control wasn't necessary to protect the house's secrets. Their growth paved the way for the next stage of the narrative, where the climax would approach, bringing together all the tension, mystery, and emotional development in a final confrontation that would define the fate of the Winchester Mystery House. With the overcoming and growth achieved, Sarah and Eleanor entered the most tense phase of their journey. Every corridor of Winchester House now seemed more aware, almost as if the house itself sensed that the denouement was approaching. The environment, which was once a confusing labyrinth, began to reveal subtle patterns, repeating corridors, doors leading to strategic rooms, windows that allowed discreet observation of events. Each detail heightened the sense of imminence, preparing the reader for the climax. Sarah continued to explore, but now with greater confidence. Each step was calculated, each decision carried the weight of previous discoveries. She revisited rooms that had once caused fear or confusion, applying her learning to decipher the house's enigmas. Secondary subplots, such as accounts from former employees, letters, and diaries, began to fit into a coherent narrative, offering crucial clues to the story's central point. Everything led to one specific room, the heart of Winchester House, where the final secret awaited. Eleanor, on the other hand, demonstrated a silent but powerful change. The matriarch, once rigid and paranoid, began to allow Sarah access to more restricted areas, signaling that she was ready to face the consequences of decades of obsession. Every gesture from Eleanor was fraught with tension, opening a door, indicating a path, or simply remaining silent in the face of important discoveries. The mutual respect and growing understanding between the two women created a delicate balance, increasing the emotional intensity and the reader's anticipation. The narrative's pace also intensified. Events began to occur almost simultaneously, footsteps heard in seemingly empty corridors, objects shifting places, shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Sarah felt that each action had immediate repercussions. The house, which had previously reacted subtly, now seemed to be testing her abilities and limits. This escalation of tension prepared the ground for the final confrontation, ensuring that the climax was not only physical, but also psychological and emotional. While exploring, Sarah revisited some subplots that still required resolution. The diaries of former employees revealed details about accidents and disappearances that, combined with the Winchester family records, indicated a pattern of events that needed to be understood before confronting the house's central secret. Each partial resolution increased Sarah's understanding of Winchester House's history and made her more capable of handling the confrontation that was approaching. The pressure of time also intensified. The house seemed to become more unstable as Sarah progressed, with doors closing quickly, stairs trembling underfoot, and corridors changing direction unexpectedly. The reader felt the growing danger. Any misstep could have dramatic consequences. The narrative remained fast-paced, alternating between action, psychological tension, and small revelations, creating a climate of constant anticipation. The protagonist's emotions reached a boiling point. Sarah grappled with fear, curiosity, and responsibility, while Eleanor faced guilt, anxiety, and the fear that her secrets might be revealed in a damaging way. The interaction between the two was at its most complex. Mutual trust and tension coexisted, reflecting the precarious balance that defined the narrative. This emotional dynamic made each step more significant, preparing the reader for the climax that would unite action, revelation, and transformation. Finally, Sarah realized the pattern that led to the heart of the house, the central room, previously inaccessible, which held the most important records and secrets that Eleanor had protected for years. The resolved subplots, objects, diaries, letters, and accounts indicated that everything converged on that point. The narrative tension reached its peak, setting the stage for a confrontation that would be physical, psychological, and moral, involving not only the discovery of the secret, but also the confrontation of fears, regrets, and decisions that spanned generations. The reader was now ready for the climax. All the pieces were in place, each character had evolved, and each subplot had found its purpose. The Winchester Mystery House, with its labyrinthine architecture and macabre atmosphere, became the perfect stage for a surprising conclusion, full of tension and revelations, where the past and present would converge at a decisive moment for Sarah, Eleanor, and the Winchester family legacy. Sarah finally reached the heart of Winchester House, a central room hidden and protected by multiple architectural barriers, where the Winchester family's deepest secrets were kept. The atmosphere was dark, with small windows filtering a pale, uneven light, reflecting off the walls covered in old portraits, maps, and yellowed records. Every detail seemed to pulse, as if the house itself were alive, aware of Sarah's presence. Eleanor was beside her, silent, but her gaze betrayed tension and anxiety. For the first time, the two shared the same space of vulnerability. Sarah, driven by the need to understand, and Eleanor, confronted with the possibility that everything she had protected for decades would finally be revealed. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards and the distant sound of the wind that seemed to drift through the house's corridors. Sarah slowly opened the central archive, revealing letters, diaries, and photographs that told a complete story of tragedies, mysterious deaths, and family obsessions. Each page read carried the weight of decades of fear and grief. But amidst the documentation, Sarah found something unexpected. Proof that Eleanor, though paranoid, had made conscious efforts to protect lives and preserve the memory of those who had suffered. The revelation brought a mixture of shock and admiration, altering Sarah's perception of the matriarch. The most tense moment came when the house's architecture itself began to react. Doors locked themselves, staircases trembled, and shadows cast by the few light sources seemed to come alive. Winchester House was displaying its power literally, not only guarding secrets, but trying to prevent them from being discovered. Sarah felt fear, but also determination. She needed to confront the mystery without losing herself in the madness that seemed to permeate every wall. Eleanor finally spoke with clarity and restrained emotion. She revealed that the house was a manifestation of her own mind, an extension of her fears, guilt, and desires for protection. Every room built, every door placed, every staircase interrupted had a purpose: to maintain the balance between preservation and chaos. Sarah realized that the matriarch was not only the guardian of secrets, but also a victim of her own obsession. Tension reached its peak when a door burst open, revealing an unfamiliar hallway leading to a room filled with family objects no one had ever seen. Among them were accident reports, letters from former employees, and diaries belonging to the Winchester children. The revelation was chilling. All the strange events in the house, which Sarah had been documenting and interpreting, were interconnected in a meticulous pattern, showing that the Winchester house was more than just architecture. It was a mechanism of memory, obsession, and survival. Sarah had to act quickly. With the records in hand, she needed to organize the information, connect the events, and confront Eleanor with the reality that the obsession, although motivated by fear and grief, had impacted generations. Eleanor, visibly shaken, finally agreed to acknowledge the extent of her actions. This acceptance didn't come in the form of prolonged dialogue, but through gestures, opening doors, showing secret passages, and allowing Sarah access to previously restricted areas. The intensity increased when a set of stairs began to shake and part of the floor seemed to give way. The house, as if resisting the final revelation, tested Sarah's courage. But the evolution she had achieved throughout the narrative, sharp perception, intuition, and emotional control, allowed her to face the challenge without succumbing to panic. Each step taken with firmness symbolized not only physical progress, but also psychological progress. The climax culminated in a sequence of discoveries that integrated all the subplots: letters from employees, relatives' diaries, accounts of accidents and disappearances. Sarah understood the complete pattern and at the same time realized that Eleanor needed redemption. The matriarch, who was previously just an enigmatic and paranoid figure, became human in the presence of the visitor. The final confrontation was not one of violence, but of understanding, courage, and acceptance. Sarah faced the mystery, and Eleanor faced her own choices and regrets. In the final moment, Sarah organized the records, showing Eleanor that knowledge could serve as a lesson, not a curse. Winchester House, which had reacted to every move with tension and threat, seemed to finally yield, allowing the truth to be assimilated. The central conflict, which had permeated the entire narrative, was resolved in a unique way, without repetitions of previous events, with a plausible twist, and with a visible transformation of the protagonists. The climax made it clear that the Winchester Mystery House was more than a physical labyrinth. It was a reflection of human fears, losses, and obsessions. The intense action, the resolution of the central conflict, and the transformation of Sarah and Eleanor came together in a decisive moment, charged with emotion, tension, and revelation. The reader experiences the narrative's peak: fear, fascination, understanding, and the feeling that the entire journey, from the introduction to this point, converged into this unique and unforgettable experience. After the climax, Winchester House seemed to breathe silently. The tension that permeated every corridor and room lessened, but did not disappear completely. The house remained alive, almost conscious, but now the physical and psychological threats had given way to understanding and acceptance. Sarah, with the records organized and the secrets revealed, felt a strange mixture of relief and respect for the complexity of the building and the historical weight it carried. Eleanor, for her part, was transformed. For the first time in decades, the matriarch seemed less imprisoned by her own obsession. Her gestures, once rigid and defensive, became softer and more cooperative. She allowed Sarah to freely explore some areas of the house that had previously been off-limits, showing that, although the family secrets continued to exist, they no longer needed to be carried as hidden and isolated burdens. Eleanor's emotional growth was evident. The acceptance of her own vulnerability opened space for reconciliation with herself and with the memory of those she had lost. Winchester House, which for years had been the stage for fears, superstitions, and tragedies, finally found a delicate balance. Sarah realized that the true power of the house lay not in its architecture or hidden objects, but in the living history they represented. Each corridor, each staircase that changed location, each object out of place, told stories of losses, decisions, and obsessions that spanned generations. Understanding these stories brought the protagonist a new perspective, that the memory and history of a family can be preserved without fear becoming a prison. The secondary subplots, resolved during the climax, now found their closure. The letters, diaries, and accounts from former employees were organized by Sarah in such a way that each story could be understood within the larger context of the Winchester family. There was no need for lengthy explanatory dialogues. Sarah and Eleanor's actions and discoveries spoke for themselves, showing the reader how past, present, and human choices intertwine in a complex yet coherent way. As Sarah left the central room, she felt a strange peace. The house continued to impress, but it no longer intimidated her. Eleanor, still observing the visitor with a mixture of caution and respect, allowed Sarah to record her findings, knowing that the truth could now be shared without the weight of guilt or fear corrupting the narrative. The legacy of Winchester House, finally understood, became a testament to grief, courage, and obsession, but also to overcoming and learning. The story's conclusion makes it clear that the protagonist's journey was not merely physical or intellectual, but profoundly emotional. Sarah emerged more resilient and insightful, Eleanor more human and open to vulnerability. The Winchester Mystery House, though still enigmatic and labyrinthine, became a symbol for reflection on the impact of human actions, the complexity of emotions, and the need to confront fears and secrets to find balance. The central conflict was resolved in a coherent, surprising, and satisfying way. The mysteries were unraveled, the subplots concluded, and the protagonists achieved visible growth, leaving the reader with a sense of emotional closure and understanding about the house's legacy. Months after her visit, Sarah often recalled Winchester House. The walls still seemed to whisper secrets, and the memory of the labyrinthine corridors remained vivid. Eleanor, though more open and less obsessed, continued to walk silently through the rooms, keeping old records and reflecting on her choices. Sarah knew the house would never completely change. Its secrets and mysteries would remain, awaiting others who dared to enter. And in silence, Winchester House seemed to observe, as if testing the courage of each future visitor. Some secrets are never fully revealed, and perhaps they never should be. Now that you've explored the labyrinthine corridors and secrets of the Winchester Mystery House, we invite you to reflect. To what extent do obsession and fear shape our lives? Share your impressions and theories about the mysteries that remain hidden. Leave your own interpretations, stories, or experiences that remind you of the enigma of this house in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss new suspenseful stories and surprising revelations. Remember, some houses hold more than just walls. They hold secrets that defy time and the courage of those who dare to enter.